Imagine a tree is your friend, the Sahara Desert, a green savanna, and our oceans clean and pristine. What a wonderful world it could be. Yet we all know about the impact of human activity on global warming and pollution. The good news, many of us have great ideas about how to protect our planet. Welcome to Echo Africa. I'm Malama Mukonde in Lusaka, Zambia.
And I am Chris Elems in Lagos, Nigeria. Greetings. These are just some of the good ideas that we have for you today. The Ugandan teenagers who are welcoming trees as part of the family. The Mozambicans helping people with disabilities to cope with natural disasters. And a young Dutchman's fight to free the world's waterways of plastic pollution. Now to a region we rarely get to report from. Chad is mostly known these days for violent unrest and environmental disasters such as drought and floods. But Chad is also home to our unique natural and cultural heritage. We went to the Enedi Plateau in the northeast of the country to hear ancient stories about climate change and resilience.
As incredible as it may seem, the Sahara was not always the arid desert we know today, but a lush, green land teeming with wildlife. Traced by our ancestors thousands of years ago in northern Chad, these ancient paintings testify that the Green Sahara is no legend.
At one point in history, the environment here was green. There was enough food for livestock. These are animals that really existed, domesticated by prehistoric people when the climate was favorable to their breeding. Later, when the climate shifted and became arid, humans adapted and introduced the camel.
Mohamed Ahmad Umar is a young Chadian scientist trying to piece that world back together through rock art and fossil remains found on site.
If we take the example of hippos or other aquatic animals, we can imagine this space was once marked by lakes and rivers.
This vanished landscape that existed between 5,000 and 11,000 years ago is well known to scientists such as paleoclimatologist Florence Sylvestre.
During this Holocene period, the Earth's orbit created conditions for a stronger summer insolation. The planet was closer to the Sun during summer, with a larger part of the northern hemisphere exposed, which led to intense continental warming and higher oceanic evaporation. There were perfect conditions for abundant water in what we know today as the Sahara.
Across the millennia, the Sahara withered into the world's largest hot desert. Wildlife disappeared, and human communities had no choice but to migrate or adapt to survive. These lessons resonate strongly with communities, such as the people from Arche, who are already feeling the impact of climate change reshaping the Sahara once again. Climatologists predict rainfall in the region could rise by 30% by 2050.
I've never seen rains like last year's. Houses were destroyed, some of our livestock was swept away, and even human lives were lost. The damage was incalculable. This is unprecedented. We're worried by the consequences of climate change on our lives. But in another sense, it also brought benefits for us herders. The rains grew fresh grass for our animals, so maybe we'll be able to live better in the future.
The increased rainfall is not only a mixed blessing for the region's inhabitants. It could be also an existential threat to the prehistoric artworks of Enedi. Mohamed is monitoring that threat with the aid of French archaeologist Frédéric Duquesnoy.
We had documented the
site in early August last year, before the heavy rains. Now we want to see where the runoff occurred and what kind of damage it may have caused. We also understand it is a blessing for the people living here today, because more humidity would make life less harsh. For now, the only solution is to document the paintings while they are still visible and intact, to preserve at least a trace of this heritage, so it can be studied even if one day it disappears.
Fortunately, the latest rains spared the paintings.
Right now, the main danger isn't climate, it's people. Some use caves for storage. Others draw graffiti on the paintings out of ignorance. These behaviors are what truly concern us.
Arche is one of the most famous tourist sites in Enedi, and also one of the most exposed to human damage.
These graffiti are part of the destruction of our rock art. People don't understand the value of this heritage. They tear apart a material proof of our history and culture. It hurts me deeply to see this.
And that's the reason why Mohamed regularly visits villages to speak with locals, raise awareness, and encourage them to protect this legacy.
For now, we can't fence off the rock art sites within the natural and cultural reserve of Enedi. So our current strategy is to raise awareness among local communities, to make them understand the importance of this heritage. Because it belongs to them and to humanity as a whole. Protecting it is crucial.
Mohamed has assembled an archaeological team to precisely date the paintings. This mission, financed by NGO African Parks, is another crucial step to safeguard this heritage and share it with the world.
This is the first time I've led such a team, and the first time multidisciplinary excavations are being carried out in the Enedi Natural and Cultural Reserve. I feel proud and emotional and responsible for guiding this mission, with the hope of finding clues that can shed light on the rock paintings of Enedi.
The results of this research, Mohamed Ahmatoumar hopes, will raise awareness of how our ancestors adapted to climate change and what lessons we can draw for the future.
With extreme weather becoming more common around the world, we all must be prepared for every eventuality. Mozambique on the Indian Ocean coast is highly vulnerable to cyclones, but when disaster hits, it's often hard to look after the most needy. We met some people trying to make sure that next time, no one is left behind.
Cyclone Idai hit Mozambique's coast in March 2019, packing winds of over 200 kilometers an hour. Helena Dorigo lives in Beira, which took a direct hit. Some windows were flying off. We tried to hold them down with ropes, but some still flew away. The roof blew off too. It was one of the worst tropical cyclones ever recorded in Africa and Mozambique's worst humanitarian crisis. Over 1,500 people died. Many of the victims were people with disabilities, like Helena, who had polio as a child. For her, family support was vital. If I was alone, I don't know what would have happened. There were 11 of us in total. When you have lots of people together, you don't feel so afraid. On your own, you think, I'm going to die. But there were so many of us, and we had shelter. We kept talking, and Helena is brave. Luckily, the living room of the house withstood the winds and gave protection to the family. Helena was stuck there for 3 weeks.
Nossas ruas ficaram todas.
Our streets were all flooded and filled with stones, metal sheets from roofs, tree trunks. The road was full of rubble, so there was no way to get me out of the house with a wheelchair.
Não tinham como me tirar daqui de casa.
It would have been impossible.
Não seria possível.
To this day, Helena's house still bears the marks of Cyclone Idai. After the tragedy, she opted to become a specialist in inclusive disaster preparedness. Now she works as a facilitator for an NGO. It's a job that's growing in importance globally. As the planet warms, disasters like Cyclone Idai will become more intense and more frequent. The most vulnerable in society often suffer the most in these climate disasters. People with disabilities are up to 4 times more likely to die in a natural disaster. So the United Nations says they must be involved in prevention.
We understand the situation of ourselves better. Our lived experiences cannot be underestimated. But apart from that, we are experts in many other areas and contribute and enrich the outcome of discussions, planning, implementation, and development arena, bringing the human rights issues in the center.
A UN survey showed the past decade has brought little progress in disability inclusion during disasters. 84% of people with disabilities worldwide say they are not prepared for disasters. In such events, early warnings can give people time to prepare or flee. This can save many lives, but information needs to be distributed in accessible formats and through multiple channels. In each country, there are very different ways of reaching people with disabilities. In Mozambique, for example, a variety of methods have been used since Cyclone Idai. We have community radio stations. We also have door-to-door information drives. Then there are pamphlets being given out in the communities. And we also work with associations, which is a key area. This is part of Helena's work. She visits communities to provide training on managing disabilities and preparing for extreme weather. If another cyclone hits Mozambique, simple yet vital instructions like where to get information and where to seek shelter could make the difference between life and death. But her work is also about getting to know these communities. Not knowing the size and characteristics of the disabled population is a big problem. The UN estimates that 1 in 6 people have some form of disability. But without quality information, it's impossible to prepare for a disaster. However, collecting such data can be complicated.
Because of erroneous impressions, stigma, and discrimination, sometimes persons with disabilities are hidden. The families don't want others to know that they exist. We are now together with organizations of persons with disabilities, encouraging states to ensure that in every survey, in every census, persons with disabilities are included.
This is a cyclone simulation exercise organized by authorities and NGOs in Mozambique. One of the objectives is to teach emergency responders to recognize the needs of disabled people. Sometimes they get sent to hospitals instead of shelters, for example, because people misunderstand their condition. We developed this project because when Cyclone Idai hit, we all witnessed that people with disabilities were being left behind in the emergency response. We saw that there was an issue. It is not enough just to provide one-off support. When we see a phenomenon like this, we need to train those institutions that manage natural disasters. Disaster response must be inclusive and take into account the needs of people with different types of disabilities. The best way to do that is to listen to them. So risk and disaster management committees have been set up in local communities. They all have at least one member with disability. We are part of this society, so there needs to be inclusion in every sense. If we are there talking, it's easier for them to remember us. It's like a shout, saying that we are here. The inclusion of people with disabilities in risk and disaster management has the power to save lives. It also shows us the huge potential we can unleash when we remove barriers and create opportunities.
Another huge challenge facing not only Africa but all over the world is our waste plastic that is polluting in rivers, lakes and oceans. Not only does it harm aquatic life, it can have a severe impact on human health. In our next report, we would get to know a young Dutchman on a mission to rid our waterways of plastic pollution.
Tons of plastic are floating in the world's oceans, driven by currents, some of it creating huge islands of waste. Bottles, nets, bags, car parts, remnants of our consumption. A problem we've been aware of for decades, and yet it continues to grow year after year. One person refuses to accept that.
My name is Boyan Slat, and I'm the founder and CEO at the Ocean Cleanup, where our mission is to rid the world's oceans of plastic.
The idea came to him when he was 16, on vacation in Greece. While diving, he discovered more trash than fish. A moment of sadness for many, perhaps, but for Boyan Slat, it was the starting signal for his mission. 2 years later, at just 18 years old, he founded the Ocean Cleanup. His vision? To solve the problem with technology. 12 years have passed since then. It's a mammoth task.
So our approach is twofold. So on one hand, we intercept plastic before it reaches the oceans. And on the other hand, we also clean up the legacy pollution that's already in the ocean.
They collect trash far out to sea using gigantic nets. Taking advantage of ocean currents, they gather plastic waste, like in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This enormous vortex between Hawaii and California is 3 times the size of France. It contains an estimated 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic, weighing 100,000 tons, or 10 times the weight of the Eiffel Tower.
What we focus on is getting all the larger stuff out and preventing the larger stuff from going in before it has turned into microplastic. So, and ultimately, we think we can get to a 90% reduction in the amount of plastic in the ocean in the next decade or so.
But Slat doesn't just want to get rid of what's already in the ocean. Over 80% of plastic enters the sea via rivers, so he's focusing his efforts there too. His so-called interceptors are huge barriers designed to prevent plastic from drifting into the sea.
It's the quick fix that we need to avoid the ocean from filling up with plastic in the next few decades.
They are now used in 9 countries, from Central America to Southeast Asia. The NGO is an important player in the effort to rid the world's oceans of plastic. But, as Ben Boteler from the Potsdam Institute for Sustainability Research stresses, the problem does not begin in the ocean.
I think it's important that we have projects like the Ocean Cleanup or beach cleaning that address plastic that's entering into the ocean, but projects like this alone, I don't think will be sufficient to address the challenge in its entirety, and that's why we really need a solution, or we need multiple solutions that address plastic from the entire life cycle.
One approach comes from the NGO Sana Mare. They organize cleanups in the global south and ensure that waste pickers are fairly compensated. Every day, 15 million people worldwide collect trash. They make an enormous contribution to society and environmental protection. The 90 million tons that are removed from nature and don't end up in the sea are not a drop in the ocean, but a decisive factor. Sana Mare supports these people and makes their potential visible. Lucas Schmitz is convinced that the plastic crisis could be solved if we involve the informal sector. This sector puts 59% of the material recycled worldwide back into the economy. How can we see these people as part of the solution and integrate them into the system? Because right now they're not really integrated. They're just doing what they have to do in order to survive. Cleaning up the oceans begins on land. Removing the plastic that is already there is not enough. For Ben Boteler, one thing is clear. The solution can only lie in a holistic approach.
Ultimately, what we need, though, is a multitude of solutions which tackle the plastics problem from all angles, so also from production, from use, disposal, recycling, to work hand in hand with projects like the Ocean Cleanup Project.
That's an issue for Bojan Slat's team too. What should be done with all the plastic that's been collected to keep it from ending up back in the environment?
Where we can, we apply recycling, and especially, of course, the plastic that we take out of the middle of the ocean, because it's actually the best quality plastic we catch. We actually are able to recycle almost all of that. In rivers, though, very often the quality is too poor, and the plastic is too polluted to recycle it all. So there, very often you are dependent on landfills. We believe, however, that plastic being safely contained under the ground is, a million times better than it killing marine life on a coral reef.
Maritime plastic pollution won't disappear by itself. Organizations like the Ocean Cleanup are removing more and more, but that won't solve the problem. Only using plastic more sustainably and recycling as much as possible will reduce the pollution of the oceans.
Imagine your best friend is a tree. How would that change how you relate to plants or understand the role greenery plays in our environment? Well, that's the idea behind a creative project in Uganda in this week's Doing Your Bit.
Condoleezza is watering her pet. She has about 2,000 of them, all trees she planted herself.
I believe that the more we plant trees, the more we get to connect to nature, the more we get even more pets, because I believe that all those 2015 trees are my pets and I love and care for them. That's why they have got to grow so big.
It's an environmental initiative in Uganda that's proven popular among young people especially. In the capital, Kampala, Sophie is celebrating her birthday. She receives a birthday cake and a tree.
I'm giving you this tree as a Peta Tree ambassador to symbolize your 12th birthday. I hope you can take it as your pet, take care of it.
I'm going to make it my pet and name it and care for it and help it grow. I'm going to name it Sorbet because when it gives me mangoes, I'm going to use those mangoes to make sorbet, which is a dessert.
Uganda has only 12% of its original forest left today. Some 120,000 hectares are felled every year for firewood or farmland. That accelerates global warming and climate change because fewer trees are left to absorb CO2.
I believe that climate change is real because I've experienced it here in Kampala during floods and other natural disasters. I'm going to plant a tree and I'm going to name this tree Margaret Brenda.
There are many reforestation initiatives, but planting trees alone is not enough. Young saplings need water, care and protection. That's why the organization ATEI started a Pet a Tree project.
You cannot have a pet that you're not ready to take care of. So have a tree pet and be ready to take care of that tree. So we are saying that if you want to plant a tree, make sure that tree grows. Most trees that are planted, to say that over 79% of the trees that are planted they don't live up to their 3rd birthdays.
Birthday girl Sophie plants her tree right away in the garden, making good on her promise to help care for it. And because it's just so good, Condoleezza gives all of Sophie's birthday guests a tree pet.
I and I want to encourage my fellow peers to do the same activity that I'm doing, because if we want to make a change, it has to start with us.
Empowering young people as agents of change, that is crucial for our future. I hope we have helped you feel empowered and uplifted too. Thanks for watching Eco Africa. Goodbye for now from Crystal Ems in Lagos, Nigeria.
And from me too, I'm Malama Mukonde in Lusaka, Zambia. For more inspiring ideas, check out our social media channels. You can also write to us at echo@dw.com. See you next time.